Welcome back to Media Talks TV with Tony J. This is going to be a special episode of retrospectives. As you know, the news came in just yesterday. Ted Turner, the founder of CNN, TNT, and Turner Broadcasting Network, has died at 87 years old. And of course, I wanted to take this time to really acknowledge how great of a person Ted Turner was. And, seeing the death of a media mogul and a giant as such as Ted Turner, it makes you think that, it makes you realize that times are really changing and the media landscape as we knew it is no more. You know, Ted Turner was one of the biggest media titans that really came up with the concept of cable, or what we knew as the superstation. And the superstation had to be broadcast via satellite. Turner Broadcasting System and WTBS at the time in 1979 had to be broadcasted via satellite. It was one of the first stations next to ESPN, which is another big cable channel that was founded in the 70s. They all had to be broadcasted via satellite, and they were one of the first networks to broadcast via satellite. At the time in the 70s and the early 80s, that was unheard of. And, you know, Ted Turner is one of those guys where, there are several, I call them the cable kings, in the sense that they help to bring a new concept of television into people's homes, and the concept of pay TV. And at the time, there were only three networks that you could watch programming on. Of course, that was NBC, ABC, and CBS. Well, when TBS came, Turner Broadcasting Station, well, that was a whole new territory. And Turner owned it. He owned it. He took a small TV station in Atlanta and turned it into a behemoth of a cable network. And not to mention, he expanded to buying intellectual property, which most people don't know of. You had to be a business person to understand what Ted had done during those days. He brought all the MGM movies, Wizard of Oz, the James Cagney movies, and also Gone with the Wind, which was his ultimate favorite. And he colorized all those films. So then, when we had Turner Classic Movies back then, I remember watching TBS, Turner Classic Movies, and TNT, and they would broadcast Gone with the Wind, Wizard of Oz, and It's a Wonderful Life on all three stations. And it was funny to me because when I was watching TV, I didn't know all three stations were together simultaneously. And it was interesting because I would flick through the channels and then it'd be okay, well, what's on? Wizard of Oz. Wizard of Oz was on TNT. Wizard of Oz was on TBS. Wizard of Oz was on Turner Classic Movies. And it's just funny. Those became the foundation for him buying old films and actually broadcasting them on cable. And he made a space for black and white films to be cherished. And, I remember the time I watched Casablanca. I had never seen a Humphrey Bogart movie before in my life until I watched it on Turner Classic Movies. And what's so interesting about that, I kind of, I kind of took a love for old black and white movies. So when I started watching Humphrey Bogart, then I watched Ben Hur, and then a lot of James Cagney films. And I started being a young person in the 90s. You never think you will be able to have the patience to sit through a black and white movie. But when those movies came on Turner Classic Movies, I would tune in because I had never seen anything like that before. And it was fascinating. Like, he had, Ted Turner had this love for old movies and actually preserving those movies. And not only was he just a media mogul, he was a media archivist in the sense that he helped maintain those classic films that would have collected dust or would have deteriorated for the world not to see them ever again. He helped popularize those titles, and those titles still remain popular despite it being almost 80 to 90 years old now. And it's because of the maintaining of those intellectual properties that, you know syndication of old films and old television shows have become a thing. you know and he just wasn't just he was bigger than life itself because he cared more about the world. And he's one of those millionaires that did the right thing with his money. He contributed to trying to fix the ills of the world, you know, because he had these concerns and things that worried him about the earth and the preservation of animals, and animals that have gone extinct. I think in so many short words, I started to care more for the environment because of Ted Turner, and started to be more cognizant of how I contribute my carbon footprint to the environment. So he made popularize environmentalism with the creation of Captain Planet. And he, he gave us 90s kids something to look up to. He was a superhero to us. If you didn't grow up watching Captain Planet, I don't know what to say to you. You missed a great era. But when Captain Planet would come on early in the morning, I would get up and I would watch Captain Planet. I love Captain Planet. And it is just like he created these loyal followers. And like I said, like nobody really talks about how Ted Turner had this big impact on young people for caring about the environment, for talking about carbon footprints and preserving the bison and the buffalo and things that he did. Like when he was on this earth, he took the money that he had and he did the right thing with that money. The Goodwill Olympics, the things not that never mind the business deals and the business failings, but it's what he did that makes him one of the most courageous people of all time, up there with somebody like a William Randolph Hearst, in a sense. And I look at him in that same capacity. He was an advocate for the world. He wanted world peace. He talked about world peace, you know, and those are the things that made Ted Turner very special to us. He's a global figure. He's not just he's not just this media maverick, but he cared about the world. And he was one of these millionaires that, we talk about millionaires being greedy and self serving. Well, he had millions and he contributed to social causes all over the world. But one of the biggest parts of his enduring legacy will be the Goodwill Games. Will always be the Goodwill Games because that was started in a sense of bringing cultures and other groups of people and other races of people together in the spirit of competition. And that's the most important thing that we should understand, you know. And he's this founder of course he gave us the 24-hour news cycle and the other things that surround it and what he created as the final frontier of news, um consumerism and news consumption. Every news organization had to follow suit because of CNN. And it seemed like he gave us an understanding and an appreciation for what journalists were doing. One of the first, his business CNN was one of the first to actually be in the midst of the Gulf War, to send his reporters into the depths of the war and broadcast it via satellite. That was unheard of. That's when CNN became the number one news network after 1991. And it's just amazing how Ted Turner started off with a small advertising company that his father created. He took the advertising company and made it into a behemoth of a media conglomerate that is now in the hands of Warner Brothers and Discovery. So he left an enduring legacy for us 90s kids. He gave us Cartoon Network. He gave us a love for old cartoons, the Tex Avery's and the Chuck Joneses of the world. Like he gave us that introduction. I don't think the generation in front of me likes to watch cartoons anymore like we used to. But when you go on TV and you see all these cartoons, you can always look forward to watching Tom and Jerry, Fred Flintstone, and Top Cat, and Magilla Gorilla, and Huckleberry Finn, and Huckleberry Hound. Excuse me. All these other great classic cartoons that he gave us in the early 90s. He had a love for all things, but the one thing that we can't forget is his contributions to environmentalism. And we have to keep that part of his legacy going because now we're in a fight to preserve what little of the earth is left and global warming and all these other things about climate change. You know, there wasn't anybody in the media talking about climate change. Before Al Gore was doing it, Ted Turner was doing it first. He was the first one to bring about the subject of climate change and the extinction of very important animals, the maintaining of the bison. He spent his last days trying to preserve the American bison. I think that's one of the very noblest things that he has ever done. We're down to the last of all the media giants, all the cable giants are gone. The only person left is John Malone and Bob Johnson. You know, so thank you for tuning in to Media Talks TV. Make sure you hit the like, share, and subscribe, and hit the comments and tell me what you think. What do you remember about Ted Turner? What's the most important thing that you won't forget about? This is Tony J, and I'm out. Peace.